Hi, good morning, guys, and welcome to Unique Not Different with me, Shamla. And today I have the director and PRO of the Trinidad and Tobago chapter for the Disabled People International, Stephen Ducran. And I also have Ryan Hutnuk, who is our interpreter for today. So we are going to discuss, last month we celebrated Deaf Awareness Week. And we are going to talk about what took place and what were the impacts and moving forward, what the Trinidad and Tobago chapter for the Disabled People International is going to do. So good morning, Stephen. How are you doing? Nice to have you back.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm very good. There's a lot of rain and some flooding, but
Yes, down in
nothing.
our area too, we literally almost, some areas almost sank. So let's talk about Deaf Awareness Week that happened last month, right? The theme was deaf inclusion. Can you tell us a little bit about the theme and what was done here in Trinidad and Tobago?
Okay. Deaf Awareness Week. Yes, there's the theme, but we didn't stick to the theme, right? What do we normally do for Deaf Awareness Week? Well, there are a few positive things that we focus on, but there are a lot of negative things that need to be fixed. For example, when it comes to the news, yes, we have some good interpreters, but the box is very small. For us as the deaf community, for us to have to focus on such a small box, it would be much better if it was bigger. It would be much more comfortable for us. And it would feel much equal when it comes to hearing people, when it comes to our access to the information. Secondly, when it comes to interpreters, I'd rather that there be no bias, because some due to religious restrictions, they restrict their interpreting. And us as the deaf community, we don't get the full message and we're not happy with that. Sometimes we miss what is being said. For example, with Arabia, whether it be a social worker or something, when we have an interpreter who sticks to their religious bias, sometimes we tend to miss a lot of information because they won't interpret things because of their religious beliefs. And us as the deaf people, when it comes to news or interviews or being at a police station, court, we cannot deal with the bias and we cannot deal with certain restrictions. So, and also we like more interpreters, so people who go to classes and we can have much more interpreters for these different services that the deaf require. For example, when you go to the police, hospital, court, social development, family services, I think all these different institutions need to have interpreters present, somebody there in staff, because when we go and we have to ask for different services and they don't know how to interpret, and then for us now to go and find a private interpreter, that's a lot of money to have to pay for a private interpreter to go everywhere with us. So if each institution has an interpreter of their own, whenever that person comes in, communication will be much easier because they have their own interpreter. It needs to be equal to the hearing people. Opportunities for the hearing is much easier to speak and you communicate with each other, but with the deaf now, it's a little bit confusing because when you try to write, big words are hard to understand as well. And another big problem is what? There are a lot of people who, when you go to, let's say we get stopped by a police officer while driving, and then they realize, wow, you're a deaf driver. And sometimes you get carried to the police station just for being a deaf driver. And that happens a lot. That is not fair. It's like you don't respect us as deaf people. So the police now, the problem is because they don't know sign language. That's why we get carried to the police station. And that makes no sense. It's very sad. And these are some important things that, a lot of people get held, deaf people get held and carried to the police station for simple things. And then, have to call somebody in to come and talk, to the police. And then you have police station north, south, west, and east. So to get an interpreter to all these locations, it's a lot. So, but I do hope that Trinidad and Tobago, a lot more people want to learn sign language and go to classes for a much better future and a much more improved communication.
So what I gathered here is two things. One, the first thing is that you're basically for the awareness, when there's awareness, you'll kind of focus on problems rather than the team. That is one. And two, this is a stakeholders problem problem that, we are seeing that stakeholder is not aware, one, and need to be educated in terms of how to deal with and how to interact with the deaf and hard of hearing community. So that is the two things I gathered. Now,
Right.
my question here is, how are persons within the deaf community dealing with this issue in terms of as stakeholders open, such as MAX, the Media Association, the Police Association, and the different bodies are open to hearing your plight and even learning sign language and, learning the different logistics of how a deaf person will go about day-to-day life.
Well, I know that they are aware of the community and things have been brought forward to them and on many occasions. The help is willing, but is who's willing to also really pay attention and make the change? Because many times they hear it and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, and they just put it aside. Yeah, all right, yeah, we hear you and put it aside. But I'm hoping that, you would understand that it is their job and their responsibility. And I really, 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 really would love them to want to come to a sign language class. And it's very important, for their job when it comes to communicating with the deaf in Trinidad and Tobago.
Going forward, what are your plans, especially plans because you are affiliated with the Trinidad and Tobago chapter for the Disabled Peoples International, right? And obviously it encompasses different disability. So in your role, what are your plans or what are the Disabled Peoples International plan to, I guess, go towards these stakeholders and even play towards getting some form of impact?
Okay. So, yes, there are a lot of meetings happening at DPI, Trinidad and Tobago chapter. And, we're waiting on HDC, right now, because a lot of disabled are, needing access. I realize hearing people and non-disabled getting access. So the another goal is, salary, But when it comes to the disabled and they get a job, they get in these low-paying jobs and they have so many things to do. It's not fair. HDC, when it comes to other groups that, when it comes to reasonable accommodation, that is missing. And when you go to the groceries, for example, if you can't walk, ramps should be put. And another important point, I realize that policies need to be put in place, and that would gain us the respect that we require. Because also you see the blind, the blind have been really, really lobbying for Braille and different ways for them to access written news or written books or anything of the sort. It looks really bad that all this has to happen just for access. It needs to be equal. Those who can see, those who can't see, everybody is comfortable reading, When it comes to where they go to the library or anywhere they'd like to go. Same thing when it comes to the deaf, and also for the blind and, technology that require them to communicate, use a phone, there's always some technology that is available to the blind that we need to have more available for those here in Trinidad and Tobago, because we all be on equal footing.
Just to close off, what advice would you give the persons, to stakeholders and also in terms of access to technology, right? What advice would you give, given your, work in the field, in terms of, okay, how should we start? Because when we dive further, you would often see gaps, right? So, and quickly, what advice would you give to persons, stakeholders to come on board to learn sign language and also, to understand what is going on within the deaf and hard of hearing community?
Okay. When it comes to technology, right, there are some people who are professionals in technology and in that field. They also tend to give us advice on what projects could be done to implement plans that we could suggest to the ministry. And upon their acceptance, maybe they could sponsor these types of technology for the disabled community. Because remember, DPI, we may not have access to such money. So we're also looking for those who may be willing, volunteer, could come meet with us, and we could talk about technology and its rise and make some projects, create some partnerships. And also when it comes to sign language classes, if anybody would like to learn, they can also contact me. It's simple. We could have some conversation. But volunteers, when it comes to the deaf and the disabled in Trinidad and Tobago, we need a lot of volunteers.
Awesome. And guys, and with that being said, I want to say, Stephen, thank you so much. And Rian, always thank you for coming and expending your time and interpreting for us. So thank you very much, team. Guys, with that being said, I want to say thank you so much for tuning in to this week's segment of Unique Not Different. As I always say, until next week, be good, do good. Bye, guys.